Welcome everybody to this week's energy reading. I am actually not planning on going into much in terms of astrology at present, mainly because we're coming up to a Mercury retrograde in Pisces once again that we actually saw last year for a much more extended period of time. There's a lot of forward movement in the planets right now, but Mercury is coming along to force us into that revisitation mode. Sort of think of it as being as if you needed to grease the wheels or make sure that things are running correctly, that path corrections that have taken place, we sometimes need to revisit them slightly just so that we can be sure that we're learning in new ways going forth. So we will be moving into that in the not too distant future. We have a new moon in Leo coming up on, I think, February 3rd or 4th, and that's going to give us a little bit of alleviation, a little bit more of a fun spirit to look forward to. The full moon absorbs the energy of that sign, and therefore, if you think of Leo energy, it's outgoing, it's when we start interacting more with our environment. The Leo is represented by the sun, so therefore the sun is obviously central to our solar system, our galaxy, our solar system. And so when you look at that from a human point of view, that essentially gives off the essence of Leonine energy as shining, being able to shine from where we've learned onto the people and the environments in which we find ourselves, and that is a very pleasant feeling. So that's all I'm going to go into for the time being in terms of astrology, and we're going to get right into the reading. Everything's sort of aligned, as always. This week's spirit animal oracle card to guide us of the general energy of the week is Skunk Spirit. That's number 54. And Skunk Spirit guides us to know our worth. So, the oracle message of Skunk Spirit is: what do you value? What do you believe in? Is your best, most authentic self on display? Skunk Spirit comes as a reminder that you can be proud of who you are and what you have accomplished. Know your worth. Not everyone will agree with you or share your values, but you can walk with your head held high, knowing that when you express your integrity, others can feel your authenticity and you will be inspired by it. Be who you are, and if your reputation precedes you, good. You have much to be proud of, and Skunk Spirit wants you to be your best self, the true you. Not everyone will appreciate you. Many people have issues of their own to address, and you may trigger something in them, but if so, no matter. Skunk Spirit calls you to be fully yourself without apology. Now is a time for honesty and admitting that something does not sit right for you. You deserve the self-respect that comes when you courageously choose to stand up for yourself and speak your truth in love. Remember who you are and what really matters to you and act with integrity. You will be so glad you did. The protection message may have seemed a little bit as if it negated the oracle message, but in truth, as everything is always in balance, there cannot be light without dark, and therefore when we interact with people, Generally, when we're vibing with a certain type of person, there's always the mirror image somewhere else of somebody who we're not vibing with. And I think we're going to get the opportunity to do some spring cleaning in terms of some of the energy that we allow into our environment. And maybe what we were talking about the need to sort of revisit some things and grease the wheels, that's also doing a little bit of a taking stock of where we are at with our relationships with other people, and to be sure that those that are having the most influence on us in our environments are being framed in healthy ways. And it's very easy for us to change the way that we interact with other people when we feel that we're not getting what we want. We have to stand in our integrity, and we have to take ownership of who we are at the risk of not being able to communicate fully and authentically with other people, because they have their own projections and their own way of perceiving what they're receiving from you. You can't control that. So if you're feeling out of alignment or balance with some people, it's not to say that you need to cut them out, but just refocus your attention where you are feeling balanced and where other people are giving you the space to be fully yourself. In harmony with that, our underlying tarot card of the week is the King of Pentacles. So again, this is a card about knowing our worth. The King of Pentacles is in full understanding of the depth of his experience and of what his hard work and lifelong experience in all domains amounts to. And there's a certain sovereignty and a certain assuredness to the King of Pentacles' knowledge of his foundation. That is the energy of the week we're coming into. We know our worth, and we take the reins, and we've cleared through the intellectual and the spiritual kings. We've been through that energy in recent weeks, and now we're moving into the tangible. I'm doing this reading, you can't see it because of the way that the camera is set up, and yes, as you can see, I am back on camera. I'm much more presentable. Well, maybe you don't think so, but I feel more presentable than I did last week. Last week was a very, very strange reading. It seemed like everything was getting in the way and distracting me, and it was a little bit like that all week long. So eventually I came around to focusing again on the right things. Maybe you had a similar energy. In any case, I hope so, because getting out of that vortex of noise and distraction certainly gave me a much clearer and lighter perspective on how I am approaching life and who I'm allowing myself to be influenced by. How we're doing this reading this week is I've taken the primary cards from the Botticelli deck, and I've clarified with the Hermetic Tarot deck, but I started to notice that something I haven't really paid attention to in the past is that there is a vertical contingency as well as a horizontal one. So usually I read the cards in the linear sense of left to right, top row being past energies, middle row being present energies, and third row being future energies, and seeing these cards evolving left to right into some form of resolution or some kind of revelation. I'm going to continue doing things that way, but I have been paying more attention to how each card forms a column from past to present to future, and it gives us a different type of insight, and I'm not sure exactly what that insight is, but I think we're going to be learning that together through this reading today. So, starting with our past energies, in our normal linear fashion, we start with the Ace of Swords, and the Ace of Swords tells me that we are coming from this cycle comes from the kernel of a fundamental truth, intellectual truth, something that has given us a sense of identity and purpose in our foundation. That is important to what we're coming into now in our lives. It's no coincidence that we've had so many tens, so many ending cards, particularly last week we had a bunch of them again, and having the Ace of Swords really gives us the idea that we're coming to we've come into an awakening of our mindful use of intellect, if that makes sense to you. These are very intricate and intimate experiences that we have with ourselves. That's how these things reveal themselves to us. It can be in our private moments of thought, or it could be a film that we watch that provokes a feeling in us, that reminds us of something, or reveals a new perspective on how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about the world around us, and in turn how we interact with other people. And the choices of experiences that we have. That Ace of Swords was clarified by the Nine of Cups. The Nine of Cups is a card of emotional fulfillment, but it is essentially the card of self-fulfillment in the emotional domain. So many people find themselves almost desperately seeking relationship because of how society has, when I say relationship, I'm talking romantic relationships. We all need relationships of a variety of natures, but this is fundamentally talking about having gone through some very core experiences emotionally that have probably led to this solid sense of intellectual truth, of philosophy. It's a self-philosophy. It's finding that spiritual maturity to come into ownership of a system of ideas, a self-ideology per se. And this has come through the accumulation of emotional victories. In other words, overcoming emotional adversity from the outside world, which in turn then allowed us to delve into our own inner emotional triggers. Because let's face it, when you get tired of having other people trigger you, you eventually come to an understanding that you're the only person that can really resolve to no longer be triggered. And that forces us to take emotional stock and reinvent the way that our neurotransmitters, and therefore our heart and mind connection, to reinvent how that process affects us, enhances us, and allows us to express ourselves. We then come into the reversed 9 of Wands, which I like seeing in our foundation past, because the 9 of Wands is a card of feeling overwhelmed and bogged down by our experiences. It's a card of cynicism, but also the emphasis is on the vulnerability within cynicism. Not something that many of us really give a lot of thought to, because cynicism seems like such a harsh external protection to such a degree that we don't even think to ourselves what is beneath that cynicism. Most people in life, as they mature and age, accumulate injury and false perception of the world around us and how it affects us, and we become deeply ensconced in the narrative of the victim, and this in turn calcifies the third eye, calcifies the way that we experience emotion. We shut our... if you imagine a color palette, that's not the word I'm looking for. I don't know what it's called when you... I do, like a kaleidoscope of color, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. We have this full array. It's like a person who's very centered and owns their experiences and can attach themselves to, can channel joy. This person has the full palette. If you have Caran d'Ache coloring pencils, if you get the box of 64, I don't remember how many, or the box of 108, you can't imagine when you think about it that there can be that many colors, right? But I mean, you could get a box of 1,500 coloring pencils, and that's sort of the way it is emotionally. And the 9 of Cups as a card pictorially depicts the person who is in balance with 9 specific cups, which represent that emotional kaleidoscope. So it's the fullness of the perception of how emotions microcosmically manifest in our lives, in a pleasant way, of course. It was clarified by the World card, or the universe as it is in the Hermetic deck, and it was, basically that was just the clarification that this weariness is ending, or has ended for us. We are coming out of a period which would have probably been quite difficult for us. A feeling of not understanding ourselves, a feeling of not being understood. And finally, as a result of this emotional truth, this journey, we are able to let go of this. And this in turn has led us to the 10 of Cups. So we go from the 9 at the beginning to the 10 of Cups, clarified ironically by the 2 of Pentacles. There's a lot of pentacles in this reading, by the way. A lot of earth, a lot of material focus. And it seems to often be offset by a card from the Cups, meaning an emotional dynamic, which is always interesting because sometimes we separate material from the emotional when in fact they have to sort of coexist, right? So the Ten of Cups is moving beyond self-fulfillment emotionally into a place of then being ready to go back into the world to explore new hues of the spectrum, with a sense of fullness, a full tank, so to speak. And the irony of that is that it leads us to this Two of Pentacles, so the emotional fulfillment and ability to then let your cup spill over in order to feed other people's emotional needs and to have new emotional experiences with other people and other, well, just to have the experience of life, you know. It leads us to a material balancing act where we, you know, perhaps we get too stuck in our emotional fulfillment. You know, we get sort of, there's a sort of almost like a magical haze to the emotional journey, that when we're feeling emotional fulfillment, we tend to withdraw from the material world. It almost seems lesser than, you know, in some way. And so this creates a little bit of a dilemma where we've maybe been going through a difficult time readjusting out of the magical spectrum into the tangible, experiential, materialistic domain. This leads us into our present, and we have the Ace of Pentacles. And that Ace of Pentacles is the manifestation of opportunity and new situations opening up to us. You know, you can go through periods of time where you feel like nothing happens, and then suddenly you're like, oh, like I'm being contacted by all these people. Oh, I have all these social gatherings to go to. Oh, I have, you know, it's like things just change very rapidly. But because the focus here is so much on Pentacles as the driving force of this energy, not forgetting that our underlying card was the King of Pentacles, sort of the godfather of that journey. I think that there's actual real opportunities for advancement that are coming our way in this week ahead. It's clarified by the Eight of Cups, which implies that we, in order to receive these opportunities, we have to give something up emotionally. We have to walk away from things that are not serving us. And I have a really strong feeling that a lot of this is about people that make us not feel good about ourselves, people that put us down, people that make us feel small, or people that let's turn it around and take the responsibility for ourselves, people that we allow to be vessels of projection, of self-harm in a way, you know, because I mean, to expose yourself over and over again to people that don't make you feel good, whether they do it intentionally or not, there's only one fool there, and it's you, because you're putting up with it. And I have noticed a lot of this lately. It's not that people are malicious or have ill intent, but they're just really fucking selfish and self-absorbed. And they have the audacity to feel that they have the permission to not take the time and not make the effort to really be mindful and sensitive to another person's experiences. This is just immaturity, ultimately, in other people. So we have to accept it. But it doesn't mean that it's not annoying as fuck. And those people often get in the way of our opportunities because they make us feel small and they reduce our sense of self-confidence. They're like spiritual and material cock blockers, for lack of a better term. And I know a couple of those, and they're not being very heavily featured by my heart in my life. And it doesn't mean that I've closed the door on those people, it just means that I'm not featuring them. They're just not, they're bit players. You know? You can allow people to step back in their orbit, you know? Sometimes we reconnect with those people when we've learned to overcome the way that they make us feel, and then we have a lesson to teach them in a strange way. We lead by example, right? We then come into, in our present, the beautiful 10 of Pentacles. So we've had that 10 of Cups, and then we move past this juggling act by moving away from something in order to give ourselves the opportunity to receive these opportunities. And then we come into a sense of, well, it's our legacy card. It's having a sense of the bigger picture. It's having a sense of where we are truly headed in our lives, what we want, and how we're going to give that to ourselves. And the 10 of Pentacles was clarified by the Knight of Cups. So I am feeling the Knight of Cups energy in its fastness. It's a card of movement, impassioned movement. Whatever this legacy that we're coming into an understanding of, whatever it is that we know we want to experience next in our lives, a fuller picture of what we want to experience, that can be through acceptance as much as it can be through innovation or reconceptualization. The Knight of Cups is a talisman. It's a dreamy card. And when I say dreamy, I don't mean hazy. But it is interesting that we're going to be moving into that Mercury retrograde in Pisces, because there's a strong message of our material world, our tangible experiences in the coming weeks, informing our emotional experiences, whatever that may mean. I don't know, we'll continue and we may find out. Then we move into 2 cards that flew out, and it's I love it when this happens, but the 2 cards flew out as the base cards, and then 2 came out together as clarifiers. So what do we have rounding out our present energy? We have the 4 of Pentacles and Temperance. So interesting that we move from understanding our legacy, our desire, our purpose, our next big picture manifestation in our lives, and we have the movement behind that, the passion, the drive, and probably even the connection to outside of us, people, a person, feeding our ability to make that decision to move forward with those things. But then we come into a Four of Pentacles energy of, that's a pre-poverty consciousness manifestation. It's when we feel like maybe we want to hold on to what we have. We're not willing to take the risk of loss in order to gain. And Temperance being joined with that tells me that perhaps Temperance usually I read as a positive card, in the sense that it means that we are seeking balance in our experiences and how we approach the path ahead. But in this case, I feel like it's clarifying what that holding on is, and that maybe we're looking too much into balance. Maybe we're spending too much time thinking of not wanting to be excessive in one domain for fear that it may cost us something in another. And the problem with that is the Knight of Cups energy is swooping through there going like, no, don't put the brakes on, You need to think bigger. You need to explore more. This is not the time to dig your heels in. This is the time to maybe actually make a grander gesture in some part of your life that maybe feels or has felt stuck or limiting in some way. And it was clarified by the Ten of Swords and the Queen of Cups. So the Ten of Swords is the end of that cycle. It's a painful end to a cycle. The implication is that what makes us think small and hold on to what we have is because of the pain that we felt in the past when we've maybe pursued our desires and been rejected, or something hasn't worked out the way we wanted it to. It's a reminder that there's always a Queen of Cups energy in all of those experiences, that we have to remind ourselves that we had those experiences in order to come into the fullness of our emotional potential and our emotional self-understanding. And where do we go from there into our future energies? We have the Seven of Pentacles, which makes sense because we've gone from having an understanding of that legacy, that purpose, then going into a bit of self-doubt or self-restriction. And then we move into assessing the legacy. So we're probably going to have these opportunities come our way, and then we're going to spend our time, we need to take a little bit of time to weigh the pros and cons to be sure that that's what we actually want to do, and probably to be sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's in the process. Because it was clarified by the Eight of Pentacles, which is the work card. So these opportunities, what we may be questioning is some aspect of the mechanics of the opportunities, in other words, let's say you've got 3 job offers. You're going to weigh the pros and cons because maybe all 3 opportunities don't actually have exactly what you wanted, or there's a shortcoming to each situation, and you have to weigh which shortcoming holds more negativity to it, more restriction. Well, I mean, it depends on the individual as to what the pros and cons are based upon our individual needs, but that's just a broad example. But the Eight of Pentacles is the work card, and it's hard work. It's being willing to put the effort in too. And I'm going with the idea that we do decide to make the effort in some opportunity or another, because we then come into the Nine of Pentacles right after that with the Emperor. So the Emperor, as the main base card, is the ownership of self-power. It is the knowledge of our own power and the self-confidence and ownership to then sort of reign supreme in our own opportunity cycles. And the Nine of Pentacles is that self-sufficiency. So there's a drive to some form of independence, some form of self-understanding, and probably from a spiritual perspective, to balance out the materialism of the Pentacles in this, it's also really about coming into a sense of what wealth and purpose actually mean and where that crossroads is, because, you know, everybody may think that having a $120,000 car that you pay $1,000 a month for on a loan or via a lease, it's probably actually would be more than that for a $120,000 car, but anyway, that would be the pinnacle of success in most people's minds, because that's how our corporate capitalist mentality has dictated how we perceive opportunity and the consequence of opportunity in a successful manner. But the truth of the matter is that a $30,000 car does exactly the same thing, and both of those cars could end up in wrecks, and the life that is in that car driving it is where the worth is, not in the cars. So it's sort of applying that. It's having a true sense of self-worth versus the outside world dictating what our worth is. And that in turn leads us to, ironically, our base card of the Eight of Pentacles. So we had this book ending. So this goes from a clarifier into a directive base card, meaning, and it's our outcome card. Something very important is coming up in the domain of work. A big change of some sort, and it's a positive change, but it's a change that comes from within. It's perhaps how we apply ourselves to work. It was clarified by the Eight of Wands. Fast-moving news, communication, intense communication revolving around work. Positive, but intense. So, now, to just take a look at this other way of looking at things in terms of the resolution. Vertically, we go from the Ace of Swords in our past, that truth, intellectual, philosophical determination, into another ace, the Ace of Pentacles, which is the opportunity that arises from that. into the Seven of Pentacles, which is the contemplation of those opportunities. So I think this gives us a directive as to how that's going to unravel. So I'm feeling like the first column to me speaks of the actual tangible situation, and then I'm feeling like the second column speaks of the way that we are emotionally and experientially inhabiting this experience. So it is more the emotional journey. It's hard, that's not entirely true. It is, actually. So we go from, in our past, the reversed Nine of Wands. So that is letting go of that feeling of being burdened, of being fearful, being trapped in a way by our circumstances, but it's our projection of how those circumstances look to us. You know, when you still have a hill to climb and you're tired, sometimes you feel like giving up. That's coming to an end, or has come to an end, and we move into our legacy, our sense of purpose. As a result of that, we've come into a greater understanding of how much bigger our purpose, our sense of purpose, and our sense of direction can become when we become unburdened by our past. And this in turn leads to self-ownership, self-empowerment, taking ownership of our power, and then expressing it in the outside world. So not entirely emotional, but it's sort of the way that our emotions and our psyche navigate this journey. And then this column, we had the Ten of Cups in our base, followed by the Four of Pentacles and the Temperance card, and then we went into the Eight of Pentacles. So from that perspective, we're going from emotional fulfillment, emotional self-understanding, emotional harmony with those around us, into a desire perhaps to preserve what we have at the expense of following through with the possibilities of new experiences and opportunities, and focusing too much on balance, rather than trusting that through self-love we maintain balance, but we have to sometimes stretch ourselves to have a broader experience of life. And this ends in devotion to craft, to perhaps a trade even. I mean, I'm not saying that everybody that's listening is going to decide to become a plumber, but it's more perhaps that we've been doing something in our lives that we haven't really looked at as being a trade. In other words, an expertise. And now we're coming into a greater understanding of, through our worth, understanding that there's a deep sense of system and experience that has informed just how good we are at something. And remembering that spirit animal oracle card, skunk spirit, know your worth. So that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed this. I feel that it is a really positive reading. And I don't know about you, but I'm ready to pull up my sleeves and hit the ground running and make some magic. So, on that note, I wish you a wonderful week ahead. I hope that you find balance, and I will see you in a week from when you're watching this. Namaste, so much love, and may some form of dream become reality for you.